Hey everybody, it's Web Series Wednesday. Welcome to a new episode of LonsTV. Today I was going to talk about a totally different show, which I will do. I'll push it back and I'll do that next week. And a lot of people have requested and sent me links to their own shows and asked if I'd do those. And I'm starting to work my way through them, so I am going to start doing some viewer-suggested shows. But I was reading today about this new show that Tom Hanks' company is producing, and it's called The 3-Minute Talk Show. And it's sponsored by Lexus. It's actually on Lexus' site, and I'll link to it below. L Studio, they call it. And so, it sounded kind of interesting. And then I read that it was hosted by this guy, Barry Sobel, who's a comedian. I guess I'd heard of him. I think he was on Dr. Katz. But I really didn't know who he was until I met him, because he came in when I was working at This Weekend. He came in and he did a bit with Kevin Pollak after they shot Kevin Pollak's chat show. He wasn't on Kevin Pollak's chat show, but he came in to do a bit for a show that he was working on, or his own show, after they shot the chat show. And I remember thinking at the time, I couldn't tell, obviously on some level, it's a persona, it's a character, because he's a comedian and that's what they do. But he was doing this thing, he was really kind of shrill and annoying, and he was just talking a lot, but it wasn't funny. It was just like filling all the gaps in the conversation with Kevin. And it's not like you have to fill the gaps in conversation when you're with Kevin Pollak before he says something funny. He's a comedian, he's a funny guy. So I just couldn't tell. He was just acting kind of stupid and annoying, and I figured well, maybe that's his character. I don't know if he's really stupid and annoying, but that's kind of how he's acting. And it sort of reminded me of Harlan Williams, who also does that, where it's his bit is that he doesn't get it and he's kind of dumb. And usually I don't think that's very funny, but I do like it when Harlan Williams is on Adam Carolla's show, because you can tell Carolla himself is it's funny, but he's also kind of irritated that I have to do a show with this guy who won't just give me a straight answer and is always just kind of blathering. So anyway, Sobel kind of reminded me of him, and I couldn't tell if it was just for this one bit or whatever. But yeah, he just seemed I was surprised that he was shooting something for his own show, because I was really, this guy has a show that people like to watch? But hey, I've got my own show. Anybody can get their own show. It's the internet. So now he's hosting the 3-Minute Talk Show for Lexus's L Studio. It's produced by Tom Hanks' Playtone company. Ben Lee, the rock star, is the rock star. He's the indie rocker. Ben Lee is the band leader, and Fred Willard is the announcer. So it sounds interesting. The concept is basically it's like a Lennon or a Conan. I always do that. It's a Leno or a Conan type show. So it's like a variety show. There's a set, there's a little mini monologue, there's a little banter, there's guests, there's musical guests sometimes, but it's all condensed to 3 minutes. So everything is very superficial. Hey, today our guest is Tom Hanks. Tom, you're in this movie. Okay, great. Now, all right, here's a comedian, and they tell one joke. And then it's now let's go to the band. And that's kind of the bit, that it's all real fast because it's all condensed into 3 minutes. I think, it's not really that funny a bit, you get it kind of right away, but it could work for the web, because it's, fast and you can just watch it all. But the problem is that they break their own rule. They called it the 3-Minute Talk Show, but the episodes are all 6.5, 7 minutes, and it's honestly it would be better if it was 3. Even weirder is they have a little clock in the corner that's counting down the 3 minutes, but of course it's fake, because the episodes are 6.5 minutes, and I couldn't, they kind of call attention to it, in the theme song, Ben Lee will say, it's 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and, Sobel will make, his kind of little references to it, but I couldn't really tell, why they would do that. If that's your gimmick, you should sort of hold to it, and it's almost funnier if you hold to it than if you just blather on as long as you like and then call it 3 minutes and be haha, see, it's not really 3 minutes. It's just kind of confusing, and it makes you look at the clock. It makes it now an issue that you're not watching the show, you're watching how long it's really been, and it's just distracting. You think it's wait, it's been more than 3 minutes, and you should be concerned, I think, if you're making a show and people are constantly looking at the clock instead of watching the show. It means they're not interested in what it is that you're doing. Also weird is that they don't really, they constantly make fun of the fact that they're doing a show on the internet, and I'll talk about that more on that in a bit, but they don't use the fact that it's on the internet. There's nothing webby or internet-y about the show. It's totally just as if this was on TV, but it's just shorter. And I was thinking, just in the few minutes I was watching it, because I wasn't really that into it, I was thinking about other things you could do that would make it sort of more like of the internet and make it feel more like a web show as opposed to just like a talk show that just happened to only be on the web. The one thing that they do that kind of I like that was sort of like that, I guess, was whenever the actors or whoever the interview subjects are, when they come out, Ben Lee and the band have actually come up with a new song about every person. So it's like, Bryan Cranston, method actor, making meth in his lab. And it's like, that's funny. Like, that's something that sort of strikes me as unique about the show. Like, there's one thing I could point to is like, oh, that's a funny new idea that they've sort of brought to the table. But, all these little mini complaints, I think the biggest issue I had with the show is Barry Sobel. It's twofold. One is I just don't really think his style of humor is that funny, and I think that he's got this weird thing that he does where rather than like he'll make a joke and then he'll spend like a minute going back like, hey, I made a joke. Did you see that joke I made? I made a joke just then. That was a joke and that was pretty funny, I think, and you should all laugh at that joke. And like it kills even if it was gonna be funny to talk about it afterwards. Like, nothing kills a joke more than explaining a joke. I'll give you an example. They had Bryan Cranston on as the guest on episode 2, and he goes, and we got a clip from Breaking Bad. Let's take a look at a clip from Breaking Bad. And they pull it up, and it's not a clip from Breaking Bad. It's black and white footage of Fred Willard, and he's with Nia Vardalos, and they're, like, exchanging sort of nonsensical but very serious dialogue. And then they cut back, and it's like, that kind of joke's been done before. Like, it's not a real clip. In fact, when Norm Macdonald used to make fun of the Letterman show, he used to do that all the time. But like, let's take a look at a clip, and then it's just him standing there with a cigar. Like, it's an old joke, but it's a joke, okay? And, they're trying. It's a joke, whatever, good enough. And it's Fred Willard, so it's sort of funny. But then they come back, and immediately Barry goes, "Hey, Fred, I didn't know you were in Breaking Bad. What was that? That was the Greek wedding woman with you." And it's like, well, yeah, that was what we saw. Barry, thanks. That doesn't make it funnier. That makes it less funny that you just explained it, rather than it just being non sequitur appearance by Nia Vardalos, who you don't expect to see in that situation. It's like a victory lap after a mediocre joke, and it kills the comedy every time. The other thing that he does, and this is really the show itself is as guilty of this as he is he's constantly making fun of the fact that it's an internet show and you're watching it on the internet, nobody's really watching, and it's not a real theater. And I know, like, comics seem to do this a lot. Like, everybody does that kind of on the internet. I mean, I do it myself, but comics seem to do that all the time, like, constantly make excuses for the fact that, like, these web shows that they're working on aren't better or whatever, or more professional. I mean, it's perfectly professional. It's well shot. Like, it looks like a show. Like, they don't need to constantly be apologizing for it, and yet it feels like it is. Like, all the jokes are basically like, no one's watching because it's the internet, none of it matters because it's not a real show. Like, every guest, and they constantly have to reference, like, they're making it seem like there's an audience, but there's not really an audience there because it's the internet. And, you get the idea that they're basically saying, like, the whole point of the show is like, oh, we're just throwing some crap together because you're a bunch of mouth breathers in your basement, watching us on a computer, and you don't matter. And that's, like, the underlying message of the show, and it's like, it's just kind of unpleasant, I think, after a while. And plus, at no point did it make me want to buy a Lexus. So that's my take. I'll put the link below if you want to check it out for yourself. Maybe I'm crazy and wrong, and this is the most hilarious thing ever. I was not really that into it. That is LonsTV for today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you all back here for a new review tomorrow for Not Web Series Thursday.